The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Meridian as field medic Sarah Chen made her rounds through the makeshift hospital tents. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel path as she checked on wounded soldiers, her medical bag slung carefully over her shoulder. The 26-year-old had earned respect from every enlisted man and officer in the camp through her tireless dedication and remarkable skill in saving lives under impossible conditions. General Marcus Hawthorne watched from his command post, his jaw clenched with familiar irritation. The decorated officer had built his career on strict military hierarchy and unwavering discipline. But something about the young medic's growing influence among the troops gnawed at him. Soldiers spoke her name with reverence, usually reserved for commanding officers, and her medical decisions often contradicted his operational priorities. The tension had been building for weeks. During the previous month's offensive, Sarah had repeatedly defied Hawthorne's orders to prioritize certain casualties over others. While military protocol dictated treating officers first, she followed medical triage principles, saving whoever had the best chance of survival regardless of rank. Her methods had resulted in unprecedented survival rates, but Hawthorne viewed her independence as a direct challenge to his authority. As Sarah emerged from the intensive care tent, she noticed a commotion near the supply depot. 3 enlisted men were arguing with Sergeant Mills about medical supply distributions. The conversation grew heated as the sergeant insisted on following Hawthorne's new directive to limit pain medication for lower-ranking soldiers. Sarah approached the group, her expression calm but determined. "What seems to be the problem here?" she asked, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had earned her the nickname Angel of Mercy among the troops. The soldiers quickly explained the situation, their faces showing both frustration and hope that she might intervene. Sarah listened carefully, her mind already working through the medical implications of withholding necessary pain relief. Sergeant Mills shifted uncomfortably under her steady gaze. "Orders are orders, Doc. The general wants us to preserve supplies for officers and critical personnel." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the impossible position the sergeant was in, but knowing she couldn't stand by while wounded soldiers suffered unnecessarily. Without raising her voice, Sarah made her decision. "I'll speak with General Hawthorne about this. In the meantime, please ensure all patients receive appropriate pain management according to medical necessity, not military rank." Her words carried quiet authority, and the soldiers exchanged glances of relief and admiration. News of the confrontation spread quickly through the camp's informal communication network. Soldiers whispered about the medic who stood up to authority for their welfare, while officers debated whether her actions constituted insubordination. The camp began to divide into 2 camps, those who supported Sarah's patient-first approach, and those who believed military hierarchy must be maintained at all costs. General Hawthorne received reports of Sarah's intervention within the hour. His face reddened as he processed the information, viewing her actions as a calculated challenge to his leadership. In his mind, allowing a field medic to override his direct orders would set a dangerous precedent that could undermine military discipline throughout the entire operation. As evening approached, Sarah continued her medical rounds, unaware that her earlier decision had set in motion a series of events that would forever change her life and the lives of everyone at Camp Meridian. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only military protocol but the very principles of humanity and healing that guided her calling as a medic. The next morning brought an emergency that would push the existing tensions to their breaking point. A convoy returning from a reconnaissance mission had been ambushed 5 miles from camp, resulting in multiple casualties requiring immediate medical attention. Sarah received the radio call while treating a soldier with infected shrapnel wounds, and she immediately began preparing the trauma bay for incoming patients. General Hawthorne arrived at the medical tent just as the first ambulance pulled up, its red cross marking barely visible through the dust and bullet holes. His intention was to personally oversee the treatment priorities, ensuring that his previous orders regarding medical supply allocation were properly followed. He positioned himself at the entrance of the main treatment area, clipboard in hand, ready to direct which patients would receive priority care. The first casualty wheeled in was Private Rodriguez, a 19-year-old communications specialist who had taken shrapnel to his chest and abdomen. His vital signs were critical, and Sarah immediately began assessing his injuries while calling for specific medical supplies. Behind him came Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, the convoy's commanding officer, who was conscious but suffering from a compound fracture of his leg and multiple lacerations. General Hawthorne stepped forward, pointing toward Lieutenant Colonel Barnes. "Treat him first," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of decades of military service. "He's the highest-ranking officer and has critical intelligence about the ambush." Sarah looked up from Private Rodriguez, whose breathing had become increasingly labored and whose blood pressure was dropping rapidly. "Sir, with respect, Private Rodriguez needs immediate surgery or he'll die within the hour," Sarah replied, her hands never stopping their careful examination of the young soldier's wounds. "Lieutenant Colonel Barnes's injuries are serious but not immediately life-threatening. Standard medical triage protocols require treating the most critical cases first, regardless of rank." The tension in the tent became palpable as other medical personnel and nearby soldiers witnessed the confrontation. General Hawthorne's face darkened with anger, interpreting Sarah's response as a direct challenge to his authority in front of his subordinates. "I gave you a direct order, Field Medic Chen. You will treat Lieutenant Colonel Barnes first, and that's final." Sarah's hands continued working to stabilize Private Rodriguez while she spoke, her voice remaining steady despite the gravity of the situation. "General, I took an oath to do no harm and to treat patients based on medical need. I cannot, and will not, let this soldier die to satisfy administrative priorities." Her words carried quiet conviction, backed by years of medical training and countless lives saved through following proper triage procedures. Other medical staff in the tent watched in stunned silence as the confrontation escalated. Nurse Patricia Williams, who had worked alongside Sarah for 8 months, stepped closer to provide assistance with Rodriguez's treatment, silently showing her support for the medic's decision. Corpsman Jake Morrison hesitated, torn between following his commanding officer's orders and supporting what he knew to be correct medical procedure. General Hawthorne's voice rose with authority and barely controlled rage. "You are in direct violation of military orders, Field Medic Chen. Stand down immediately or face court-martial for insubordination." The threat hung heavy in the air. But Sarah continued her work, knowing that stopping now would mean certain death for the young private whose life hung in the balance. "Sir, I understand the consequences of my actions," Sarah replied without looking up from her patient. "But I cannot stand by and watch a soldier die when I have the training and ability to save him. Court-martial me if you must. But I will not abandon my medical oath." Her words were heard not only by those in the tent but by several soldiers who had gathered outside, drawn by the commotion and concerned about their wounded comrades. The sound that shattered the morning air was unmistakable. 5 sharp cracks echoed across the camp as General Hawthorne drew his service pistol and fired warning shots into the air above the medical tent. The deafening reports sent birds scattering from nearby trees and brought every soldier in the immediate area running toward the commotion. The general's face was contorted with rage as he pointed the still-smoking weapon toward the tent. "That's enough," Hawthorne bellowed, his voice carrying across the entire medical compound. "Field Medic Chen, you are hereby relieved of duty and placed under immediate arrest for insubordination and willful disobedience of direct orders." The general's chest heaved with anger as he holstered his weapon, seemingly unaware of the shock and horror spreading across the faces of everyone present. Inside the tent, Sarah's hands had never stopped working despite the gunshots. She had successfully stabilized Private Rodriguez and was already directing Nurse Williams to prepare him for emergency surgery. Her voice remained calm and professional as she called out medical instructions, though those close enough could see her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline coursing through her system. The crowd of soldiers that had gathered outside the tent grew larger by the minute. Word spread quickly through the camp's communication network about what had transpired. Men and women who had served alongside both the general and the field medic whispered among themselves, trying to process what they had witnessed. Many had personally benefited from Sarah's medical care and felt a deep loyalty to the woman who had saved their lives or the lives of their friends. Sergeant First Class Mike Thompson, a 20-year veteran who had served under Hawthorne for 3 years, pushed through the crowd to get a better view of the situation. His face showed clear confusion and concern as he tried to reconcile the respected commanding officer he knew with the man who had just fired a weapon in anger at a medical facility. Thompson had been treated by Sarah for a severe infection 2 months earlier, and her care had prevented him from losing his leg to amputation. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, despite his injuries, had witnessed the entire confrontation from his position on the stretcher. His face showed a mixture of pain from his wounds and distress from what he had observed. As an experienced officer, he understood military protocol and the importance of following orders, but he also recognized the ethical dilemma that Sarah had faced and the courage she had shown in standing by her medical principles. Dr. James Foster, the camp's chief medical officer and Sarah's immediate supervisor, arrived at the scene just as military police began cordoning off the area. The 53-year-old physician had been in surgery when the incident occurred, and the reports he received while scrubbing out seemed almost impossible to believe. He had worked with Sarah for over a year and had never seen her display anything but the highest level of professionalism and medical competence. As the military police approached the tent to make the arrest, Sarah emerged with her hands visible and her head held high. She had completed the immediate stabilization of Private Rodriguez and ensured that he was ready for transport to the surgical unit. Her uniform was stained with blood from her patient, and her face showed exhaustion from the emotional and physical demands of the morning, but her dignity remained intact. "Field Medic Sarah Chen," announced Military Police Sergeant Davis, "you are under arrest for insubordination, willful disobedience of orders, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline." The formal reading of charges seemed surreal against the backdrop of the medical emergency that had triggered the confrontation. The gathered soldiers watched in stunned silence as handcuffs were placed on the woman many of them considered a hero. Some faces showed anger at what they perceived as an injustice, while others reflected confusion about the complex situation they had witnessed. The camp had been divided before, but this moment crystallized the conflict in a way that would have lasting consequences for everyone present. News of the arrest spread through the camp with unprecedented speed, traveling through every tent, bunker, and common area within hours. Soldiers gathered in small groups, their conversations hushed but intense as they discussed what had transpired at the medical facility. The story grew and evolved with each telling, but the core facts remained consistent. Their beloved field medic had been arrested for refusing to abandon a dying soldier. Private Rodriguez survived his surgery, a fact that was not lost on the enlisted men and women who served alongside him. Word of his successful recovery spread just as quickly as news of Sarah's arrest, creating a stark contrast that highlighted the consequences of her decision to follow medical protocol over military orders. The young communications specialist became an unwitting symbol of the ethical dilemma that had torn the camp apart. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base's executive officer and second in command, found herself in an impossible position. The 51-year-old career officer had built her reputation on fairness and sound judgment, but the events of the morning presented her with a complex situation that had no clear resolution. She had received dozens of informal complaints and requests from soldiers asking her to intervene on Sarah's behalf, while also facing pressure from General Hawthorne to support his disciplinary actions. Dr. Foster requested an immediate meeting with the command staff to discuss the medical implications of the arrest. His argument was straightforward and compelling. Removing their most skilled field medic during an active deployment would compromise patient care and potentially cost lives. He presented statistical evidence of Sarah's success rates and the impact her techniques had made on overall casualty outcomes since her arrival at the camp. The military police holding facility where Sarah was confined became an unexpected gathering point for soldiers seeking to show their support. A steady stream of visitors requested permission to see her, though most were denied access due to the serious nature of the charges. However, the symbolic gesture of their presence was not lost on the command staff monitoring the situation. Nurse Williams organized a quiet but significant demonstration of support among the medical staff. Without seeking official permission, she and 12 other medics, nurses, and corpsmen submitted a joint letter to Colonel Hayes, requesting Sarah's immediate release. The letter outlined their professional assessment of her actions and their unanimous support for her decision to prioritize patient care over administrative concerns. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, despite his own injuries and the awkward position his involvement had created, requested to speak with Colonel Hayes about what he had witnessed. His testimony provided a first-hand account of the confrontation from someone who had been directly affected by the conflict, but maintained objectivity about both the medical necessity of Sarah's actions and the challenges facing military leadership. The camp chaplain, Captain Robert Morrison, found himself counseling soldiers on both sides of the controversy. Men and women struggled with the conflicting loyalties they felt toward their commanding officer and their field medic. Many expressed feeling torn between their duty to follow orders and their belief that Sarah had done the right thing in prioritizing the life of a fellow soldier. As evening approached, General Hawthorne remained in his command post, reviewing reports and communications about the day's events. The volume of informal complaints and requests he had received was unprecedented in his 25-year military career. Several senior non-commissioned officers had requested meetings to discuss morale concerns, while company commanders reported unusual tension and distraction among their troops. The situation had evolved far beyond a simple case of insubordination. The arrest had created a camp-wide discussion about the relationship between military authority and professional ethics, the value of individual lives versus operational priorities, and the role of conscience in following orders. These conversations took place in mess halls, during guard duty, and in the quiet moments between military operations. Private Martinez, who had been saved from a severe infection by Sarah's intervention 3 weeks earlier, began organizing an informal petition among the enlisted personnel. His efforts were technically unauthorized and potentially risky to his own military career, but he felt compelled to take action on behalf of the medic who had saved his life. The petition quickly gained signatures from soldiers throughout the camp who had benefited from Sarah's care. The investigation that followed revealed details that stunned even the most seasoned military personnel at Camp Meridian. Colonel Hayes, leading the official inquiry, discovered that Sarah's medical records documented an extraordinary pattern of life-saving interventions that had gone far beyond standard field medic duties. Her innovations in trauma care under combat conditions had reduced the camp's mortality rate by 40% compared to similar facilities. More shocking was the discovery of Sarah's personal journal, which military investigators found during their search of her quarters. The entries revealed months of careful documentation showing how General Hawthorne's supply restrictions and treatment priorities had resulted in preventable deaths and prolonged suffering among lower-ranking personnel. Her precise records included names, dates, and detailed medical explanations of cases where following the general's orders would have led to unnecessary casualties. The journal also revealed Sarah's internal struggle with the ethical dilemmas she faced daily. Entry after entry showed her wrestling with the conflict between military hierarchy and medical ethics, documenting her attempts to find compromises that would satisfy both military protocol and patient care standards. The final entries before her arrest showed her growing conviction that she could no longer remain silent while soldiers died from inadequate medical care. Dr. Foster's Medical Review Board, hastily assembled to evaluate the case, reached unanimous conclusions that further complicated the situation. Their report stated that Sarah's triage decisions on the morning of her arrest were not only medically sound but represented the highest standards of emergency care. Private Rodriguez would have died within 30 minutes without immediate intervention, while Lieutenant Colonel Barnes's injuries, though serious, were stable and could have waited for treatment. The military legal office found itself dealing with an unprecedented situation when Private Martinez's petition reached over 300 signatures, nearly half the camp's personnel. The petition formally requested Sarah's release and commended her actions as heroic rather than insubordinate. Legal officers noted that such widespread support for someone facing court-martial charges was extremely rare and indicated deep systemic issues within the command structure. General Hawthorne's position became increasingly isolated as more details emerged about the events leading to Sarah's arrest. Several officers privately expressed concerns about his judgment and emotional stability during the confrontation. The fact that he had drawn and fired his weapon during a non-combat medical emergency raised serious questions about his fitness for command that could not be ignored by higher authorities. The breakthrough came when Captain Morrison, the camp chaplain, facilitated a series of confidential interviews with personnel who had witnessed the confrontation. These accounts provided a complete picture of the events that differed significantly from General Hawthorne's official report. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Sarah had remained calm and professional throughout the incident, never raising her voice or showing disrespect despite the extreme pressure. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes's formal statement proved to be the most damaging evidence against General Hawthorne's version of events. As the highest-ranking witness to the confrontation, his testimony carried significant weight with the investigating officers. Barnes confirmed that Sarah's medical assessment had been accurate and that her decision to treat Rodriguez first had been based on sound medical judgment rather than defiance of authority. The camp's medical outcomes during Sarah's 3-day imprisonment provided additional evidence of her value to the mission. 2 soldiers died from complications that Dr. Foster believed Sarah would have prevented, while several others experienced prolonged recovery times due to delayed or inadequate treatment. The statistics painted a clear picture of the cost of removing an exceptional medic from active duty. Colonel Hayes found herself facing mounting pressure from multiple directions as the investigation continued. Higher command authorities had begun asking pointed questions about the situation at Camp Meridian, while local personnel continued submitting requests and complaints about Sarah's treatment. The case had evolved from a simple disciplinary matter into a complex evaluation of leadership, medical ethics, and military justice. The turning point came when the camp received an unexpected visit from Brigadier General Elizabeth Warren, the regional medical commander who oversaw all field medical operations in the sector. Her arrival signaled that the case had attracted attention at the highest levels of military command and that significant changes were imminent. Brigadier General Warren's investigation lasted only 18 hours, but its conclusions reverberated throughout the entire military medical system. Her team of specialists conducted interviews, reviewed medical records, and analyzed the camp's operational procedures with the efficiency that had made her legendary in military medical circles. What they discovered exceeded even their expectations for institutional problems. The first shock came when Warren's team calculated that Sarah's medical innovations and patient advocacy had saved an estimated 47 lives during her deployment. Lives that would have been lost under standard protocols or General Hawthorne's restrictive supply management. Her techniques for treating combat wounds with limited resources were so effective that Warren immediately ordered them to be documented and distributed to all field medical units in the region. General Hawthorne's conduct during the confrontation was deemed grossly inappropriate and potentially criminal in Warren's preliminary report. Drawing and discharging a firearm during a medical emergency violated multiple regulations and demonstrated what the report termed dangerous instability under pressure. The investigation revealed that this incident was part of a pattern of increasingly erratic behavior that had been overlooked due to his previously distinguished service record. Sarah's release came with an unprecedented public ceremony that drew personnel from across the base. Brigadier General Warren personally removed the handcuffs and offered a formal apology on behalf of the Military Medical Command. The assembled crowd of soldiers erupted in spontaneous applause that lasted nearly 5 minutes, with many openly weeping as their beloved medic was restored to duty with full honors. The most stunning revelation came when Warren announced that Sarah was being immediately promoted to Chief Medical Officer of the camp, with Dr. Foster's enthusiastic endorsement. Additionally, she was being awarded the Military Medical Excellence Medal for her outstanding service and courage in maintaining medical ethics under extreme pressure. The promotion meant that future medical decisions would be made by medical personnel rather than line officers without medical training. General Hawthorne was quietly relieved of command and transferred to a desk position pending a full psychiatric evaluation and possible court-martial proceedings. Colonel Hayes assumed temporary command of the base while a new commanding officer was selected. The change in leadership was met with visible relief from personnel who had witnessed the deterioration of morale under Hawthorne's increasingly rigid and counterproductive policies. Private Rodriguez, fully recovered from his injuries, was present at Sarah's reinstatement ceremony. His emotional speech about the medic who had saved his life brought the crowd to complete silence, followed by the loudest ovation of the day. His presence served as living proof of the importance of her ethical stance and the lives that hung in the balance of such decisions. The ripple effects of the incident extended far beyond Camp Meridian. Military medical protocols throughout the region were revised to ensure that medical personnel had clear authority over treatment decisions regardless of patient rank. Sarah's documentation of systemic problems led to investigations at 12 other facilities, resulting in improved care for thousands of military personnel. Dr. Foster was promoted to Regional Medical Supervisor, a position created specifically to prevent future conflicts between medical ethics and military hierarchy. The new structure ensured that medical decisions would be made by qualified medical personnel with support from military leadership rather than interference. The story of Sarah Chen became legendary throughout the military medical community, studied in training programs as an example of courage and professional ethics under extreme pressure. Her willingness to risk her career to save a fellow soldier's life embodied the highest ideals of military medicine and inspired a new generation of field medics to prioritize patient care above all other considerations. Years later, Camp Meridian was renamed the Sarah Chen Medical Training Facility, where military medical personnel from around the world came to learn the innovative techniques she had developed. The facility's motto, etched in stone at the entrance, read simply, "First, do no harm." A reminder that the medical oath transcends all other loyalties, and that true courage sometimes means standing alone for what is right.